Right, so are we rolling? Hey everybody, Jonathan Ying here, designer of Power Rangers Heroes of the Grid, and welcome to the How to Build a Ranger workshop. Today we are going to be talking about the design process behind building a Power Ranger kit for Power Rangers Heroes of the Grid. I think someone posted on the Facebook group recently, like we officially have about over 40 playable Rangers, including all of the different character cards. And that will include the Rise of the Psycho Rangers expansion altogether. And we've got a lot more coming down the pipe. So suffice to say, I've had a fair bit of practice at this particular thing. I know someone is very excited about the possibility of building Auric the Conqueror. And I can neither confirm nor deny that is something that we are thinking about, but suffice to say, you can at least see what might go into the development of a new character for the game and what kind of things I keep in mind while building them out. Let's see. So I think for now, unfortunately, due to some discussions with our licensors, we are not necessarily allowed to reveal things that we are planning in the future. So we had originally pitched this as one where we would build Ranger live with the community right here, but we might end up saving that for a later event. So keep an eye out for that. But for now, this will be a good crash course in what goes into a good Ranger design. And I know there's a big homebrewing community for the game, although I have not really gotten a chance to look into that for a number of contract reasons. I imagine this may be helpful for you guys too, to sort of test out ideas for your own Rangers, your own characters in the game. So let's start off with the most basic, the very first Ranger that we designed for the game. We're going to talk about Mighty Morphin Red, Jason Lee Scott. So let's bring him up. Yep. Okay. Awesome. Thank you, Desiree. So here is the the two kind of tent poles of the character. We've got their character card and their Zord card, right? The Zord cards generally come fairly early in the design process, and the character cards are almost always the first part of Ranger's design. Their character ability will usually be the defining feature of the character. It's the thing we know that the Ranger will always have access to in every battle. This is what the Ranger is about, right? And so Jason Lee Scott, being the first Ranger I designed and having this very explicit leadership role, I wanted to give him a mechanism that was important to establishing like what the teamwork is like, right? So his ability, which is a very coherent one, which is allowing one Ranger once per battle to re-roll any number of dice during an attack. So that ability is very nice. Players completely understand it, and it always feels helpful, right? You always feel good to be like, oh, someone didn't roll enough damage. Okay, hey, you can roll some more. Notably, that feels more, compared to other abilities where a character, say, deals damage, this reroll ability feels much more like you are supporting your team than necessarily dealing damage yourself. You are allowing someone else to go do the action of rerolling their dice, which felt in line with Jason's ability as a leader and as a good supportive team member. To tie into this, we have the Tyrannosaurus Zord, whose ability is to exhaust before Ranger performs an attack, to add 2 dice to that attack. So that makes the attack bigger, gives them more bite. It's, gives a lot more impact to the hit that then synergizes with his leadership ability that helps him re-roll those dice if they need to. And so Jason was sort of the prototypical, like, here is kind of the core of a Power Ranger, right? Like, I kind of wanted him to be very representative of, the design going forward, because he is possibly the most iconic Power Ranger, with the possible exception of the Mighty Morphin Green Ranger. So let's go into his combat cards, and we'll see kind of how a combat deck gets cooked. I always kind of describe them as being a recipe. So here, every Ranger has 6 unique combat cards. They have 2 cards that are singletons, which you'll see on the right, Blade Blaster and Power Sword. Jason will only have 1 of each of those, and then 2 copies each of the other 4 cards. And that makes up a full combat deck. So, and while we're doing this, we've got a pretty, a cozy group here. Feel free to ask questions, and I will, interrupt my spiel to talk about those. I see people are talking about how Anubis Kruger, who has a similar leadership role, fulfills a very similar thematic niche as Jason, which was very intentional. So first of all, we've got, we'll start on the top left. We've got the Blade Blaster. Now, the Blade Blaster is an interesting card because it was one that I wanted each Ranger to feel very unique, but I also wanted to make sure that the Rangers felt like a cohesive team in some way, right? Like, I knew players would be mix and matching different teams, so I wanted a player to each Ranger to bring something with them that gave them a bit of representation for the rest of their team and what their series was kind of all about. And it also gives just a tiny bit of shared knowledge among players. When you're new to the game, kind of knowing, okay, everyone has a Blade Blaster. That gives a nice, easy question anyone can ask, like, hey, does anyone have their Blade Blaster? Is something that gets conversation going and is a nice thing that you know your team is capable of, even if their other moves might surprise you. So the Blade Blaster here is one of, honestly, the slightly more complicated effects of the game. It has an energy cost of X and has a rolls dice based on the amount of energy spent. This is a bit counter to the standard formula, sorry about that ringing, of the standard formula we've developed for attack abilities. Because Blade Blaster can scale pretty much infinitely, like however much energy you put in, you will be able to roll that many dice. We reeled in the amount of the energy cost into dice out at the lower end. So if you compare that to, say, Lead the Charge, which is Jason Lee Scott's basic attack, which is a 2-die attack for 0 energy, for a Blade Blaster to get to comparable damage, you have to spend 2 energy, right, for raw damage. Right, Blade Blaster does raw damage, not dice. Sorry, I was thinking of certain other cards. But yeah, so Lead the Charge is Jason's bread and butter ability. It's flows into his leadership power by allowing additional dice on later moves. And it is kind of the template for every Ranger should have one of these cards, which is a simple low damage attack for 0 energy with a perk that feeds into their character archetype. And you'll see this recur throughout the game. Let's see. Ranger Slayer's ability, wait, sorry. Someone just had a question that came up last night. Ranger Slayer's ability, says she has to be part of combat to damage at the end of the combat sequence. Is that intentional to make her a sniper? Let's see. So every Ranger's character ability only operates in battles that they are participating in general. Well, that seems like more of a rules question to post on the Facebook group. Yeah, so for Ranger Slayer, like all character abilities, just so that people know, all character abilities, you must be participating in a battle to use them. So Jason Lee Scott cannot use leadership in battles he is not participating in. And Ranger Slayer also cannot use her ability in battles she is not participating in. That is true for all Ranger character abilities. Zord cards are the exception to this, where you can use Zords in any battle. Okay? So yeah. Let's talk about his next card, Tyranno Slash. Now, every character has generally will have a slightly more powerful card, which will cost some amount of energy. So for Jason, it is a 1 energy card that rolls 3 dice and allows him to reroll any number of dice on that attack. Again, that is very much feeding into what his core themes are, which is, you know, bonus dice and rerolls. So with the bonus dice, or with Lead the Charge adding bonus dice and Tyranno Slash representing rerolls, we've kind of got this nice spread of power for him. With Tyranno Slash, we were sort of fiddling on how many attacks would be weapon attacks versus physical attacks. Notably, like in the series, Power Rangers tend to use mostly martial arts and only break out their power weapons in dire situations. In the comics they kind of use the weapons more regularly, and we decided to make that also true in the board game, mostly because it helps differentiate them. So all of the Rangers are always presented in their sculpt with power weapons, etc. So let's see. Now we've got 2 additional cards. We've got Block and Team Tactics. Most Rangers will have usually a reaction and one reaction and 1 maneuver. which are their non-attack cards. We don't want to overfill a ranger's deck with them because not being able to attack can be a big debilitating factor. And so the fact that almost half of Jason's deck is non-attack cards feeds him a little more into a supporting role, right? Like he is sometimes, while his attacks are very strong and powerful, he is not always the most capable of finishing off large groups of enemies on his own, which is why he needs a team. Team tactics feeds into that most directly, which is gain 1 energy. Another ranger may immediately play an additional card. So this is a maneuver which takes the place of an action but allows an additional action to be played. So an interesting element of team tactics. There was a version of this card early on, which was simply play this card as a reaction, where you could play the card and gain energy when other players play cards. Like that's really, functionally, that is what it is at the end of the day. It is, hey, you save a card play and you spend this card to get a free energy. That ended up not really feeling like leadership. That felt like, you know, you would add that on at the end as other people did stuff. Whereas by having the card play happen first, by being like, I play team tactics, which gives us an energy, and now someone else gets to play a card. And I think it suddenly puts the onus on Jason to, it feels like he's being a leader. He's, you know, strategizing. He's telling other people what to do. It was intentionally done to make that a maneuver so that it occupied a spot in the combat's discussion that really felt like it supported the themes of the game. And so this is an element where the game design supports the themes, when mechanically there are a number of other implementations that could be cleaner or even, you know, equally viable mechanically, that don't make the character feel right, if that makes sense. We've had a couple of, it sounds like we're having some slight technical issues. Hopefully the sound is coming through all right. You can let me or Desiree know in the chat if things are a little weird, but hopefully this continues to be clean. Next, we've got Block, which is Jason Lee Scott's reaction. It is possibly the most simple reaction card in the game. It is simply when a ranger suffers damage, reduce that damage by 3. Jason kind of dives in, he defends his allies, he protects them. Honestly, this card was for a while in Mighty Morphin Blue's deck, because, you know, Billy is also a very defensive character. Like he's got, you know, defense themes in his kit. But we ended up moving it to Jason just to make Jason this really solid all-rounder that still fulfills this leadership role, but we wanted to give him, like, you know, we liked this idea that he, you know, saves his allies, he, you know, gives commands, like it gives him this good generalist ranger look, mostly because we imagine a lot of new players will gravitate towards Mighty Morphin Red. Red Ranger is one of the most popular rangers, people like him, and so he's a great ranger to give to first-time players because he can kind of do anything and always feel like he's contributing to the battle. Block is also very slightly above the curve when it comes to the damage calculations. Blocking 3 damage is pretty big, and early on there were testers noting that it kind of maybe could cost 1 energy, and it still felt good at costing 1 energy. But I decided to make it 0. It was somewhat low. It was fairly low impact and always felt great to, you know, negate this nice chunky amount of damage. And it still costs you a card. And by making Block a 3 shield card, you are really functionally just taking that hit for an ally. And so because of the way damage calculations work, it is as if someone, you know, you just ate the first 3 damage of that hit if Block was on top of your deck, but you play it from your hand. Similarly, when you do take damage and you reveal Block, it feels really nice to just be like, okay, yeah, that is exactly like, you know, that is the point of that card. It doesn't feel bad to lose it. And then finally, we've got his Power Sword, which is his power weapon, which is 3 energy, pretty big. You know, most ranger power weapons are 3 energy. Some of them break the mold a bit by going into X or, you know, varying things up. But the Power Sword is one of the classic cards. It is a 5 dice attack, which is almost every die that you get in the base box. And it adds 2 dice to the next attack performed. Again, feeding in, it's basically a souped up version of Lead the Charge. in a lot of ways, with the high damage capacity ranked even higher from Tyranno Slash. It is Jason's iconic weapon. It looks cool. It does good. It does crazy good damage. And that is kind of the template from which many other power weapons are designed. So as a whole, you're basically you're spending 3 energy for a total of 7 dice in a fight. And that is pretty close to the standard for the calculation for power weapons, which will spike above the curve when it comes to energy in and power out. But again, Rangers will only get 1 of these cards in their deck. So that is basically Jason Lee Scott in a nutshell. And understanding this will make other characters, as we move forward and go through their kits and their design process, probably make a little more sense. And a lot of these core themes are going to inform future cards. So let's go to one of my favorite characters in the base game after Jason. I believe we're going to Mighty Morphin Black. Desiree?
Yep.
So, someone asked a really good question. What goes into determining the number of shields a card has? So that is often a bit more art than science, because several cards actually play with the number of shields on them. Actually, can we go back to the previous page so we can talk this one out, because this is a good topic. Let's see. So several cards, their shield value will play into their actual combat value. If block was a 1 shield card, it would kind of feel really bad to get it discarded from your deck when you get hit, because it's like, oh, instead of blocking 3 damage, I'm only blocking 1. So by making it 3 shields, it kind of fulfills its role. Similarly, Team Tactics is a card that we wanted to be easy to recover and use again. And so by putting it at 1 shield, it's much more likely to be a card chosen when you perform recover actions based on the number of shields to pull back into your deck with some regularity. Although, there is this interesting balancing factor where cards with high shields tend to remain in the deck more often, they'll survive being hit, whereas cards with low shield values are much more likely to be discarded, but they are also easier to recover, right? And so often they're that tends to balance itself out. So many cards can operate at whatever shield value can be appropriate, at which point we then balance out the other cards based on how often we kind of want players to see them or how regular we want them to be. Usually the basic attacks fall at two shields, where the maneuvers and reactions will fall at the 1 or 3. Occasionally the heavy attack will go to 3 shields if we want it to be more resilient and to hit the hand a little more often. But yeah, that's sort of the general idea of the shield values. Shield values sort of became this core component of the recipes when it comes to building decks. You'll notice every Ranger has, their total deck value is 20 shields. And that is true even with Rangers like Mighty Morphin Yellow, who actually have more 2s and fewer 1s and 3s, or I was about to spoil a Ranger. There's a later Ranger who's going to mix that up a little more and actually have a higher proportion of 1s and 3s and fewer 2s. I will leave which Ranger that is up to speculation for the moment, but they have a slightly more lopsided, min-maxed shield values in their deck, and they play around with that mechanically in some interesting ways. Anyway, let's move on to Mighty Morphin Black. So someone noted they would like to see a card or set of cards that represent the combined weapons. We actually have in the Legendary Ranger pack, we are introducing the Power Blaster, the combined weapon as a new alternate Zord card. So if you don't like the Zord card that comes with your Ranger, you can swap it out, and now you're packing the Power Blaster, which mechanically allows every Ranger to contribute cards to do a nice big attack. So let's see. Now, Mighty Morphin Black was one of the other early Rangers. I love Zach Taylor. He's one of my favorite characters in the game. He's one of my favorite characters in the show. And he had some of the most revision over the course of development compared to Jason, who basically got that character ability of leadership at the start, and it never changed throughout all of development. Hip Hop Keto had a variety of effects. At one point it gained energy, at one point it moved damage tokens around. There was a whole bunch of different stuff that Hip Hop Keto did, Zach Taylor's signature ability. And let's see. Ooh, whoa, actually, hey, this is an incorrect version of that card. This is actually one of the early Hip Hop Ketos. Desiree, where did you find this? I think this was from the Kickstarter. This might have been from the Kickstarter assets. So Mighty Morphin Black's power is not this, which is gain 1 energy after you defeat an enemy card. This ability ended up going to, I believe, Aisha, the second Mighty Morphin Yellow, and being renamed Momentum. So that's funny. Aisha will also be appearing in the Forever Rangers pack. So Zach's normal ability is actually, when you defeat an enemy card, deal 1 damage to an adjacent enemy card. And so that created this theme of spread out impact damage on him. And meanwhile, the Mastodon Zord was a Zord that we sort of, this is one of the weirder Zords. It has something of an almost out of combat ability where you can exhaust it to remove a foot soldier figure from any location and place it on the experience track. So that has some interesting balancing factors. It is similar to, usually a 2-die attack will often beat a single foot soldier card. Many foot soldier cards are 2 health. And so functionally it is very similar to the Tyrannosaurus, just adding 2 dice. However, by making it a guaranteed kill on a foot soldier, that makes it a little more reliable, but being only able to target foot soldiers reels it in. So that kind of fits that balancing factor of how much a Zord is worth. At which point, and the other note is that this doesn't affect the combat sequence. It only affects the enemy figures. So often it is done out of combat, so you don't have to worry about too many foot soldiers in a fight. But once you're in the battle, removing the foot soldier does not remove any cards from it, though it can weaken effects like Swarm Attack. So let's dive into Mighty Morphin Black's character deck. His comic cards. Hopefully these should be fine. We'll see. That was very funny. So you guys got a glimpse into actual development content there. So yeah, we've got Blade Blaster as per usual for all the Mighty Morphin cast. And then we've got his basic attacks. He's got his basic attacks are Reckless Flow and Sweeping Strike. Notably, he does not have a maneuver. He instead has an additional basic attack. We kind of wanted Zach to be a very aggressive sort of bruiser type character with a lot of high impact stuff. And his most of his support effects got focused into smooth moves. So we'll go into his reaction, which is smooth moves, which is a nice simple one. It reduces damage by 2 and gains you an energy. So it's not quite as much damage reduction as block, but it does give you energy over the course of it. So it, in some ways, combines block and team tactics. But it requires an enemy card to go off, which is a big mitigating factor. If you play team tactics right, you may be able to defeat all of the enemy cards in a combat sequence without them ever resolving. If an enemy card never properly resolves, you can never play smooth moves. So smooth moves is kind of a just in case, card for Zach, and it kind of feels really cool to avoid an attack and build up energy. It felt really in keeping with his kind of that like dance fighting that he does in the show, which I really love. Someone asked, how hard was it to balance the Gold Ranger? So to go on the subject of the Gold Ranger, there are certain Power Rangers who are canonically really powerful, like Mighty Morphin White, like the Gold Ranger. And those Rangers often, we actually have a little bit of freedom where players are okay with them being a little bit OP. So while I did focus really hard on making sure that the Gold Ranger felt cool and balanced, the primary objective was actually to make sure he didn't feel underpowered. It was okay if he spiked a tiny bit above the power curve because he's the Gold Ranger. Players mostly seem to think that's just cool. And he's not powerful enough to necessarily, no Ranger can solo the game. And so having certain Rangers that are a little easier to use with, slightly more oomph with some of their cards can be okay and can make them a little, make certain things a little less challenging. Other Rangers will have more focused niches. Like, for example, Zach is all about that damage, but he burns through his deck incredibly quickly. So if we look at his cards, Sweeping Strike is a 2-die attack that deals 1 damage to an enemy card adjacent to the target. So that's a nice, he spreads damage out. Very few cards actually do area of effect damage in the game. And so that kind of gives Zach a little bit of a special niche. And yes, we are going to get to Power Axe. But his other cards are actually kind of meant to give him, we didn't want him to just be an area of effect fighter, right? Like we wanted him to also be able to choose between doing that or high single target damage. So cards like Mammoth Slam, or cards like Reckless Blow, where he discards the card from the top of his deck, functionally taking a bunch of damage to do a much bigger swing, which is a 1 energy 4-die attack, gives him a lot of oomph. Notably, Reckless Blow, if you just play it without discarding a card, actually falls a bit under the game's damage curve. Spending an energy for a 2-die attack is not really that optimal, which we felt comfortable with given that the amount, being able to spend an energy and a card for a 4-die attack is pretty beefy. Meanwhile, we've got Mammoth Slam, where if you've got a certain number of cards in your discard pile, it becomes a 0 energy card for 3 dice, which sort of, you know, balances out Reckless Blow's low end by giving Mammoth Slam a really cool high end. Zach is all about hitting hard and playing with dice, and because he's kind of Jason Lee Scott's best friend, it really felt cool to have him be synergized with Jason really well. Like Jason and Zach can take on a whole lot of enemies really reliably. Then we've got his Power Axe, which is his iconic weapon, and possibly the most powerful power weapon in the game. It is honestly spikes a bit above the curve, and it is, but we're okay with that, primarily because we wanted to make sure there was a solid strategy that Rangers could build around and see the immediate cool impact of, right? Like, we wanted to make this almost an obvious lead-in to the kinds of cool combos Rangers can do. So Power Axe is a 3 energy card for a 3-die attack, which isn't that good at the end of the day. But the effect is what makes up for it, which is that you pick 2 of those dice and apply that to every enemy adjacent to the target. So even if you roll perfectly average, that is, you know, out of the gate, a 7-die attack or a 9-die attack, you know, 9 dice of damage if you're fighting a monster and foot soldiers. The Power Axe is so strong, which, you know, when comboed with things like the Tyrannosaurus Sword and Leadership, gives it this huge reliability and lets you burst down big enemies. That is kind of the, jokingly, we refer to the Power Axe as the noob stick of the game. It is the weapon that new players will often gravitate towards, and I know several players in their first several games are like, we don't play without Mighty Morphin Black. He's too strong. Like, we can't win without Mighty Morphin Black, which is sometimes I worry it is treated a bit like a crutch, but you know, there are other really powerful combos that exist in the game. Lauren Chiba's Black Box combos are similar, and you know, finding the other synergies and seeking greater challenges is something that I'm really excited to watch players do, which they have done in the game. And but yeah, so Zach was sort of designed to be this intentional powerhouse bruiser that the team can like structure big combats around. However, because he plays really riskily by discarding cards and often, you know, and playing a lot of cards very aggressively, it can often lead to him losing the Power Axe and needing to get it back for the climactic fight. He's really one of my favorite characters to play, and we're going to get to something really neat after this, or at the end. But first, let's see, what was the next one we were going to look at? Right, Ninjor. Let's talk about Ninjor. So Ninjor is one of the later characters. He's in the first ally pack, and he is he leans very heavily into theme, because Ninjor is one of the most weird allies the Rangers have. And with him, I was trying to think of what goes into being, how do you make the players feel like a ninja, right? What effects, what abilities mechanically can we use within the game system to let the players feel like they are getting away with something almost, which is this, you know, which is being a ninja. there isn't really a stealth system in the game, right? Like being stealthy, like we ended up going a really different direction, stealth for Phantom Ranger, which I'm really excited about, but he's not part of this talk at the moment. But I really kind of like the themes we ended up with Ninjor, because he's more of the Naruto theme of Ninja, where he's shouting a lot in fights, and he talks like Dudley Do-Right, which I just love. But Ninjor's core ability is once per battle, each ranger may look at the bottom card of their deck and may swap that card with a card in their hand. So this feeds into a few things. Very few effects let you manipulate the bottom card of your deck. Most things are the top card of your deck because it's what you're going to draw. And it's also, more defensively relevant because knowing what's on top of your deck lets you defend yourself a little more effectively. It is honestly a pretty souped up version of another Blue Ranger's ability, Billy, who can strategize, which lets him look at the top card of his deck, lets any ranger look at the top card and swap it with a card in their hand. But Ninjor lets every ranger do it, which is fun because he, gives the rangers the ninja power coin. It is a big part of him being this big supporting player in the rangers' lives. And, he created the power coins. He should have a really interesting, impactful ability. And so Ninjor ends up playing dramatically with the bottom card of rangers' decks. And that became his core sub-theme. So you'll also see that in Ninjor Battle Mode. Exhaust this card to allow up to 3 rangers to each choose 1 card from their discard pile and place it on the bottom of their deck. This is more recovery than an equivalent card, which again is actually, which both Billy and Zeo Blue have, which allows rangers to recover cards to the bottom of their deck, or recover cards to the top of their deck, but they only allow recovery of 2. Ninjor Battle Mode allows 3, but because they're going to the bottom, you don't get to use that to help you stack your defenses. Instead, they're just kind of filling in your deck and giving you a little more staying power. And let's go into his combat cards, which is going to be fun. And yeah, high shield cards when you defend, when they go to the bottom, Ninjor letting you get them back is a very fun effect. So Ninjor is a little bit on the goofier side, and his abilities are pretty weird. Notably, he does not have that much in the way of strong attacking plays. He's got, unlike the other Rangers where at least half of their deck or more than half of their decks are attack cards generally. For Ninjor, it is 50-50. It is very possible for him to draw a full 5-card hand with no attacks in it. But those cards are still pretty effective, and they are designed for Ninjor to be a good supporting player. And so it opens up with Encouraging Word, which has a cameo by I'm completely spacing on the cop guy. God. Well, it's been so long since I watched Turbo. Someone in the chat can say it. Let's see. But so that reaction, play when any ranger rolls a blank result on a die. That ranger may choose 1 card in their discard pile and place it on the bottom of their deck. Blue Centurion, thank you. Thank you, chat. Sorry, I can't believe I spaced on that. I have to turn in my Ranger fan card now. So that effect is kind of a fun one because it really feeds into the fact that Ninjor is very upbeat, is very encouraging, and he's just like, you know what, this is great. And he, you guys got this. And, he brings Rangers back when they're at their lowest point. And what point feels lower than when you roll a bunch of blanks on an otherwise cool attack? Encouraging Word is really useful for getting cards back into Rangers decks and giving Rangers some staying power in a fight. Notably, it is actually similar in effect to Block in that it can kind of negate 3 damage worth of harm that is up to 3 damage worth of harm that has been dealt to a Ranger. And so that is a reason why we gave that one 3 shields. He has the Flying Kick card, which is his basic attack, which will very appropriate to a ninja and to the fact that Ninjor flies around on a giant Nimbus cloud. So let's see. Flying Kick is a 2-die attack that gains 1 energy. This is one of the most simple bread and butter cards. It first appeared in Mighty Morphin Pink's deck, which was kind of part of her which originally we weren't necessarily planning on reusing too many card abilities, but we realized that some of them, like Flying Kick, are so basic that it really felt appropriate to reuse them sometimes when they felt good for another Ranger's kit. And so far, people haven't complained about demanding every card be unique, because if every card is completely unique, then, sometimes there are good ideas that we then just don't get to reuse for no good reason. Someone asked a really interesting question in chat. Zero asked, what led me to make the weapons a one-time use instead of an equipable card? So equipment is kind of a weird factor in Power Rangers. Like if it were a card that you play and then it stays out and modifies your future moves, that really didn't quite fit in with the activities of the game, like the actual card play. And I wanted Rangers to have big dramatic special moves, and generally power weapons felt like the appropriate place to put it. Their normal combat should use those weapons. So Jason has Tyranno Slash, where he's slashing with his sword, and if it was an equipable item that you only had sometimes, it would feel weird for his other attacks to use that weapon when he doesn't have it equipped, if that makes sense. It just didn't really flow with the themes that I wanted for the game. Like, the game isn't about equipment, it's about choices. It is about the actions you're taking. That isn't necessarily to say we won't introduce equipment later on. Similarly, the Power Blaster functions like Zords. If we were to use this game system for another license or a future genre, Zords might be replaced by things like magic weapons or special items, because they function more like equipment than other things, this passive item that you constantly have. Whereas Ranger kits, we felt like we wanted Rangers to have access to the full suite of their abilities as quickly as possible. Let's see. So Ninjor's real bread and butter card, though, is his Ninjato Blade, which is a 1 energy, 3-die attack, which falls on curve, with the benefit that after you play it, you may place it on the bottom of your deck instead of discarding it. And that's kind of a big deal, because having recursion is very powerful. The fact that playing cards removes them, sends them to the discard pile, forces Rangers to recover more often. Ninjor is sort of, this card gives him a lot of recursion at the cost of some energy, but it is still a really solid attack. And it's important, though, for him to be able to do this, because often he only has 1 or 2 attack cards in his hand. And if it's Ninjato Blade, he can at least get 2 attacks off by comboing that with his character ability. Nimbus Strike is his power weapon, which for some characters, the power weapon is just their special move. And so Ninjor flying around on his Nimbus and slashing through enemies became that big effect. It is similar to, honestly quite similar to Power Axe in that it is functionally a big AoE. It can hit 3 different cards, and any boosts that you apply to it are applied to all of the cards that it hits. So that is a very nice, hefty blow. But again, you kind of want to combo with other things, and it doesn't let you pick your targets. You have to target a keyword. And so if the priority target doesn't have guard, passive, or fast, or if there is only 1 or 2 cards that are your priorities that have that keyword, then you may lose some of the benefit of the card. Again, Ninjor is one of the weirdest Rangers we designed, with one of the most unusual player kits. So Unlock Potential, which allows Rangers to ready Zord cards that have been used. That is a very expensive ability. And effectively, I made it cost roughly half of a Zord. Or, well, honestly, it kind of roughly costs 1 full Zord. Because on average, a Zord will spend 1 energy, or will either gain you 2 energy, or recover 2 cards, or sometimes 1 energy and 1 card. So by spending 1 energy and a card to play Unlock Potential, you are functionally spending that card to turn that Zord use into something else. It is benefit neutral, but strategically very viable. Showboating, meanwhile, is one of the weirdest cards in the game, where you basically skip the enemy's turn, and an enemy has a card that does something, it no longer does anything. Congratulations. You're completely ignore that card's effect, but you also skip the next Ranger turn, which is this very, losing a Ranger turn is a huge deal. And ended up being kind of this nice, and ended up working out really well for Ninjor, because he is big on like doing funny poses after things. Like it would kind of make sense that if he does this dramatic dodge, he's going to showboat a little. He's going to waste a little bit of time. But it can be incredibly useful, as someone noted, against really high impact cards like Bones' Regeneration. Let's see. So let's move on. We're actually running a little low on time, aren't we? We only have 10 minutes left. Is that right, Desiree? Oh, cool. Great. Then we're actually doing great. Perfect, then. Let's go to Zeo Green, then. So someone in chat, Hamster Master 8 asks, correct me if I'm wrong, but you've mentioned before each Ranger color loosely echoes a certain kind of gameplay. Could you please elaborate on that? So this was something I was kind of building in early on to the system, which was that each color would kind of have a sub-theme representing what they do in Sentai. Because in Super Sentai and in Power Rangers, the Blue Ranger is often the smart one. The Red Ranger is often the leader, and so on and so forth. So I thought it might be kind of neat to give different colors their own sub-themes. So Blue Rangers, because they are smart, often have card draw and card manipulation as a sub-theme. As you see with Ninjor, Mighty Morphin Blue, Hyperforce Blue, a lot of Blue Rangers do this. Meanwhile, Red Rangers are leaders they'll often deal with, and so we represent that, by Jason being the quintessential leader with things like rerolls. So Lauren Shiba has rerolls and bonus dice and other effects that kind of boost their allies. Meanwhile, Black and Green Rangers tend to be very high damage, high impact. That kind of remained true for a little while until I realized, like, as the series went on, it broke the mold occasionally with, say, Koda being a Blue Ranger from Dino Charge. Koda was a Blue Ranger who was a caveman, who was very strong and not that smart. And so giving him a gimmick of like card manipulation would be a little bit weird. So we ended up moving a little bit away from that, from tying character kits to specific playstyles, or character colors to specific playstyles. Although because that is still thematically true of the Power Rangers, we often still have Blue Rangers being the smart ones and Red Rangers being the leaders. We will still see those themes crop up a little more often than not. But it is no longer a core ethos of our design. So let's see. And Koda's actor Yoshi Sudarso was part of one of our live plays, which was very exciting. He also played Hyperforce Green, which was very cool. That he had kind of he got to be two different very cool Rangers. Green in Sentai is often a child who transforms, which is funny. They tried that once with Justin as in Turbo, and the fan base did not seem to love that. And I work very hard to try and reflect character personality in their decks. So Ninjor is a little bit goofy and a little bit weird, but very supportive, and so we try and make that feed into the mechanics that he plays with. So here, let's talk about Adam Park, my favorite Power Ranger. Although this may not be my favorite form of his, Zeo Ranger for Green. The Zeo Rangers were the winners of the fan poll at the end of the first Kickstarter. We asked the fans which team they wanted us to do next, and Zeo won by a pretty solid margin, which some people complained about because they were like, look guys, they're gonna do Zeo anyway, we should pick something weird. I mean, I was definitely kind of expecting us to do Zeo soon, but certainly that poll definitely made Zeo come out next. And Zeo has a lot of cool stuff going on in their kits. Adam Park, being one of my favorite Rangers, ended up getting one of my favorite character themes. I kind of built him out to be sort of a combo builder. I wanted him to sort of take damage and turn that into powerful moves. And that kind of fed into the fact that his thematic animal is a bull. And I kind of wanted this idea of he was sort of building up, he was taking hits and then building up momentum and then countering with giant blows. So his character ability is each time a card deals damage, gain 1 hit token and place it on this card, maximum 3. You may spend hit tokens on this card to trigger special abilities on your combat cards. So unlike other Rangers who have once per battle abilities that actually do something, Adam Park's character ability feeds directly into his combat deck. This was something I was experimenting with early and am somewhat less certain of carrying on in the future as things like Legendary Ranger mode and and other game modes sort of make having a character ability that feeds so thoroughly into that has no use outside of the combat deck less viable and kind of less fun. So this is an example of something that we've kind of moved away from. But it's still a fun power, and I'll probably revisit something similar in the future. Generally, when someone just asked, what comes first, Ranger abilities or their combat deck? Often it is the abilities. I think I mentioned that early on, but yeah, often in character abilities, is where I pick out what I want their core combat mechanic to be, and then the decks get built around them. Because as we mentioned earlier, general deck formula is, a 0 energy cost 2 die attack with a benefit that feeds into their theme. A 1 energy cost 3 die attack with a benefit that feeds into their theme. Like that kind of stuff tends to be easier when you know what their theme is. So notably, Zeozord 4 feels a little bit off because it doesn't manipulate hit tokens on the player. Instead, it's exhausts this card to deal damage to an already resolved enemy card equal to the number of hit tokens on it. So it does talk about hit tokens on a card, just the ones that you've dealt to enemy cards. The reason why it targets already resolved enemy cards is, first of all, because this ability would be way too strong if you could target anything. And secondly, that it is basically used to counter enemies that have done something, right? Because Adam Park is one of the few Rangers who wants enemies to hit him to build up his cards, we wanted the Zeozord 4 to feed into that playstyle. And so once the enemy resolves, they're in for a real hurt. So let's go into his combat deck and we can see more of that. Let's see. Bringing it up. Yeah, it's taking a bit, but so here we go. We've got his basic ability is Charging Strike, where he charges forward, and it's a 2 die attack, and you may either gain 1 hit token or spend any number of hit tokens to gain an equal amount of energy. So this is sort of a card that lets him sort of feed his team more, because the hit tokens on his card don't really help other people. But using Charging Strike, he can convert all those hit tokens to energy. Or if he doesn't have any, he can play Charging Strike to start building those up without having to take hits. Then we've got, feeding into that, we've got Cross Chop, which is his 1 energy, 3 die attack. And that has, after you play this card, you may spend 1 energy or 1 hit token to place this card on top of your deck instead of discarding it. So that is a nice beefy hit that lets him, and you can spend a hit token to put it back on top of your deck, which is really nice because he wants to absorb hits. And by making sure, hitting them with cross chop and then putting that on top, the next card you're going to take from your next hit. Following that up, we've got Avenging Strike. So Avenging Strike feels a little weak, right? It's a 1 die attack. However, if you have hit tokens, you can then scale that up, where every hit token you spend adds a die to the attack, building up to a 4 die attack if you can spend 3 hit tokens. And 4 dice for 0 energy is a big deal. And it is a very fun, it is a nice, big, impactful hit after you've spent all this time building up power. Follow that up with one of my favorite cards, which is Not Done Yet, which you can spend 1 energy, you gain a hit token, and then may play a card from your discard pile. So this is a really interesting effect because you gain the hit token, and then the card you play from your discard pile can then spend that hit token. So if you combo that with Cross Chop, you play Cross Chop and spend the hit token to put it back on top of your deck. You've then just kind of gotten a huge amount of efficiency out of out of playing these cards. It also has a star ability, which are defensive effects that occur when Rangers get hit, which I knew I wanted to give this character because I knew they wanted to be tanking hits. And this star ability lets you boost the shield value on Not Done Yet based on the hit tokens that you have. And finally, we've got Power Pod. Lastly, we've got his 2 singletons, Power Hatchets and Power Pod Sword. Power Pod Sword is one of the most powerful cards in the game. It kind of is there to fill in the slot of the fact the Zeo Rangers don't have area of effect otherwise, like they don't have someone like Zach. But each of them have the ability to turn one of their normal attacks into a beefy area of effect ability. Power Pod Sword is probably a little bit above curve. It turns out to be a bit more powerful than we had initially intended. So later versions of similar cards have had their scaling reeled in a touch. But overall, I'm still really happy with how the Zeo Rangers play, and I think they're a nice contribution to their teams. Power Hatchets is interesting in that you perform a 4-die attack. You can spend hit tokens to re-roll those dice if you want. And then afterwards, you just go to 3 hit tokens, which means that you can follow up a 4-die Power Hatchet attack with an immediate 4-die Avenging Strike attack. Or you can get all of your energy back from that Power Hatchets with Charging Strike. Power Hatchets is a great way to flow into it. I will note, there is one thing I regret about Power Hatchets. Now, Power Hatchets does one thing that I think was a design mistake. The ability that I gave it to spend hit tokens, which was that you can re-roll dice on your hit based on those hit tokens. You don't always want to re-roll your dice, which means that there are times when you will have 3 hit tokens, play Power Hatchets, and then not really want to spend any re-rolls, and then you just go back to having 3 hit tokens. You kind of end up wasting a lot of impact on it. You generally will want to play Power Hatchets when you have like 1 or 2 hit tokens, so that you will always make sure that you are gaining some amount of benefit, even if you don't want the reroll. If I were to remake Power Hatchets again, I would probably make the hit token effect, give it some other ability so that it feels more, always good, right? Which is what Power Weapons should be. Otherwise, Power Hatchets is still a really powerful card, and I would probably would need to reel in its dice if I gave it more other impacts. But yeah, that is Zeo Green in a nutshell. Notably, Zeo Green was one of the second sets of Rangers. Like, I think I made Mighty Morphin, then Hyperforce, then Zeo. So they were still very early on, and we were doing a lot of experimentation. And I learned a lot with that. Let's see. There have been some interesting questions here. So I believe Power Pod Sword it has to be when they perform an attack, add 1 die to the attack. You cannot use Power Pod after rolling. You have to use it before rolling. So it's when the card is when the attack is performed, before dice are rolled. I think we wanted to include that reminder text, but didn't quite flow in. It didn't quite fit on the space-wise. So if you do it afterwards, it's not that big a deal. But the intention is that you boost it beforehand. Someone noted that it's interesting that Ranger-like enemies are more likely to use dice. That is intentional as a thematic thing. So enemies like Evil Mighty Morphin Green or Ranger Slayer will have dice as part of their combat, whereas most enemies deal flat damage. Dice is kind of the Ranger mechanic, and so enemies that play like Rangers use dice. So Evil Green uses dice. Lord Drakon, who is like this evil Ranger like times 10, actually doesn't roll dice to kind of represent how far he has fallen from being a Power Ranger. Someone else asked, are there any aspects or mechanics of the game that we don't want Rangers to interact with? They mentioned deployment decks are probably something that we don't really want to mess with. And that's true. Those kind of fiddle with things. We kind of don't want things to mess with panic levels. Like making a location unpanic is kind of, it's possible, but it would definitely be a weirder effect. But generally, as I'm not leaving anything off the table, mostly because I have easily several hundred more Rangers in the franchise that we may eventually get to. And there is a limited amount of design space in the world, and I'm not going to flat out say we don't want to use any of it, any small piece of it. But certainly there are things we are less likely to futz with, and the deployment deck is one of them. Let's see. So it's 3:04. So let's go into our final Ranger of the day for this talk, and then we can go into questions. How's that sound, everybody? It doesn't matter. We're going to do it anyway. Let's talk about Adam Park Mighty Morphin Black. What? Another Mighty Morphin Black? So this is the Forever Rangers version of Mighty Morphin Black. And it was really interesting coming back to Mighty Morphin Black after like 2 years and some change. And we've got our first Thunder Zord here. Well, I mean, he's like the third Thunder Zord, but whatever. The Lion Thunder Zord, which, and so here's an interesting one, where not only did I want to convey the character of Adam Park, I also wanted to bring back the Mighty Morphin Black deck and tweak it somewhat to fit Adam Park, you know, to really represent his role as the Ranger, while still fitting with the themes that had been built up in the Black Ranger's deck. And, you know, because it's still got to feel like the Mastodon Mighty Morphin Ranger. But we wanted to feed into the new playstyles, which we introduced. For those of you who don't know, Adam Park's Mighty Morphin Black character card was a Kickstarter exclusive that was released with the very first Kickstarter as an alternate character card for the original Mighty Morphin Black deck. His ability is adaptable, which is once per battle, you may swap a card in your hand with a card in your discard pile. So where Zach emphasized the area of effect damage, Adam Park emphasizes recovery and cycling. Notably, adaptable has an effect that is very similar to Not Done Yet, which lets you play cards from your discard pile that he has in his Zeo version. I often like having these character themes flow through. So Tommy Oliver has this constant theme of adding and manipulating bonus dice. And like Tommy Oliver has a number of sub-themes that have persisted throughout his various Ranger forms, which I did a whole article on when we released the Tommy Oliver pack, which you might be able to hunt down. But let's talk about Adam here. So the Lion Thunder Zord, we wanted the Thunder Zords to feed into the classic Mighty Morphin Zords, but kind of represent them in a souped up fashion, while not necessarily making them overpowered, right? So they had to do a similar, very dramatic effect without necessarily, you know, while still not being just directly, like, just better. And so this one is exhaust this card during any Ranger turn in battle. Defeat one Foot Soldier card instead of playing a card. So with the Lion Thunder Zord, instead of just targeting the foot soldiers, he actually does allow you to target the enemies. However, it forces you to spend a character action to do it. So, you know, you are spending a turn where the Mastodon could just be exhausted whenever. The nice thing about the Lion Thunder Zord is it basically ignores any other effects. So you'll notice Divatox boosts foot soldier cards, and you know, there's all these guard effects, and it's like sometimes you like don't want to deal with a big foot soldier with a bunch of guard on it. It's really effective against a really high health phalanx formation from the Quantrons. It just lets you like, okay, exhaust this card, spend a turn, that foot soldier goes away. No dice roll, it's just done. You defeat it. Yeah, that is its ability. And that feeds into Mighty Morphin Black's big damage stuff. Let's see. That's a great question. Someone just asked a question about Dragon Shield Jason. Well, let's talk about that after we finish talking about Adam Park, because I'll do a bit of a Q&A at the end of this to round this out, and then we can talk about other Rangers and other design choices I have made, good and bad. Yeah, as someone noted, the Lion Thunder Zord is a little more strategic, letting you pick and choose what's the worst foot soldier. Yeah, it kind of is really. We wanted the Thunder Zords to be slightly more advanced, and so a lot of their effects have drawbacks that mean that there are times when they might be suboptimal to use, and times when they are very, you know, more powerful to use than the much safer and more traditional Mighty Morphin Zords. Let's look at Adam's combat deck, which I believe is going to be one that you guys have not seen before. We're going to look at his whole deck. So, hey, here's the big reveal for the stream, right? All right, so he still has Blade Blaster and Power Axe. Those are still part of his deck. It just didn't feel like Mighty Morphin Black without them, even though in their respective series, they didn't use those power weapons as much during those seasons. It still just was kind of too cool a part of their core kits to remove. Like, we had several playtesters being like, okay, I like this, but I miss Power Axe. And doing an alternate weapon that also has the name Power Axe or something didn't quite feel right. So yeah, all of the, so people know the Forever Rangers still retain Blade Blaster. They're the two card Blade Blaster and Power Axe. But, ooh, that's interesting. So I think that is an incorrect art piece on Rapid Hit. I might need to go check that out. Yeah, I don't think these are the updated files, but you know, maybe they are. Let's see. But Cosmic Cannon. So if this ends up being the final print version, that'll be interesting. I'm pretty sure this isn't though. Well, We'll see. So Cosmic Cannon was one that we wanted him to utilize the Power Axe in its blaster mode, which is, so it's a 3-die attack. And notably, you'll see on Leapfrog Strike, Exploit Opening, Rapid Hit, Cosmic Cannon, Leapfrog Strike, and Rapid Hit show Adam Park's new character gimmick, which is, while this card is the top card of your discard pile, add some effect to your attacks. So Rapid Hit is a 0-cost 1-die attack that you perform twice, and then you perform it again. So that is just 2 1-die attacks. But combined with his other cards, you then get the bonus benefit of those. So Cosmic Cannon, while that card is on top of your deck, you always ignore guard on any of your attacks. This includes attacks granted to you by things like the Red Battlezord and Anubis Kruger. Leapfrog Strike every time is a 2-die attack, and while it's on top of your deck, every time you perform an attack, gain an energy. And Rapid Hit is every time you perform an attack, add 1 die. And Rapid Hit is one of the most effective bonuses, but it is also tied to its best combo. So if there's a Rapid Hit on top of your discard pile, you are only going to have one other one somewhere else in your deck. So that is going to be trickier to pull off, but still very impactful when it does, because at that point it becomes a 0 energy 4-die attack, or 2 0 energy 2-die attacks, which is way stronger. He's still got Power Axe, which will again synergize with Cosmic Cannon, allowing him to ignore guard, Leapfrog Strike to get a bit of energy back, or Rapid Hit to deal bonus damage. And finally, he's got Exploit Opening, which is honestly kind of a throwback to classic Mighty Morphin Black, which is play this card when another ranger defeats an enemy card, deal 1 damage to an enemy card adjacent to the target. It really is just straight up Zach's ability on a card, similar to how Lauren Shiba's Discipline is Jason's ability on a card. The nice thing about Exploit Opening is that if you want to make Zach's deck more about area of effect damage, you can swap that in for one of his other cards, because we wanted these Forever Rangers decks to be fun to mix and match and customize with the existing Mighty Morphin cards. So yeah, I think those are all the characters we've got for the moment. Hope you guys enjoyed that. And now let's do a bit of a Q&A. How's that sound, everybody? For the last 15 minutes. Let's see. So someone asked, on Dragon Shield Jason, do you feel that adding 2 cards and losing his ability is a good trade? Do you consider him a unique case, or has there been a regret since his creation as more modes and building Ranger decks came onto the scene? So I think it works really well for Dragon Shield Jason. It is a design thing that I might do it more in the future, like Adam's appearance in Operation Overdrive with the Defender Vest would be a strong candidate. But it felt really appropriate to like give him the Dragon Shield and the Dragon Dagger. Like it just felt very on theme for Dragon Shield Jason. It feels like doing other ones might make that feel less special. And I do know a lot of players really desperately miss having leadership when playing Dragon Shield Jason. So even if it is absolutely balance-wise worth it and powerful, it can feel kind of less fun. It feels out of the gate less fun sometimes to lose this ability you've gotten really used to. I will say it's one that we are not likely to use again in the near future, but it's not something I would count out. It would just need the right mechanic and the right character for it. Was sort of the prototype for how we might want to do Battleizers, which is still kind of on the table as a design idea for how they might work. Generally, we like making full new character kits a little more now. Let's see. Hopefully that answers that question. How long did it take from initial design thoughts to the above design on Adam's deck? Oh, well, I'm going to say 4 months. I had a strong, I knew Adam's character ability, and I knew I wanted an ability that fed into it. Deciding to have it be the top of your discard was a pretty big revelation, and the rest of the deck sort of flowed out from there. Balancing him did take a while. Those abilities kind of shuffled among the different cards during development, which led to some very OP combos. But at the end of the day, it ended up working out really well. Yeah, I think he was one of the more fun ones to test. And let's see. How do you go about reevaluating the utility of Rangers after release, like Vesper, some of Tommy's of Green Tommy's cards, etc. So that has become less of an issue as the game has gotten more popular and we've expanded our playtesting groups. Early on, our playtesting teams were fairly small, and we were testing an insane volume of content. Like that first Kickstarter was basically a year or more's worth of content out of the gate. And so we were pretty overburdened, and so there were some design issues that slipped through, including things like Mighty Morphin Green originally not being that good at soloing due to his running out of cards really easily, or Vesper Vasquez being a little too reliable at triggering her special ability, both of which have received errata and updates in later sort of releases of those characters. And yeah, so there are plenty of characters, as I've even noted here, like that I have, I'm constantly growing as a designer, I'm learning new things, and as the game expands, I am discovering combos and discovering breakpoints in the system that I'm learning to A, avoid in the future, and B, thinking about, are there ways to either flow back into this with new enemies or new rangers that feed into those mechanics, or is there a convenient way to release small tweaks or errata on those kinds of effects? It's definitely been a learning experience, and I've gotten pretty good at it at this point, but that won't mean that some slightly off mechanics or weird game feel might occur in the future. But that is much less likely as our playtesting groups have also gotten better and more familiar with the game. Let's see. Why don't the Forever Ranger cards have text or something to differentiate them from their classics to separate them in Legendary Ranger mode? Yeah, we were considering things like an alternate icon or something, but we realized that we had already released many of those characters in their other iterations, things like Jason Lee Scott's Dragon Shield. We had just had this precedence in our graphic design, and we decided that it wasn't a high priority during development. Yeah, sorry about that. Any chance of having a scenario where you compete with other Rangers, either against each other or to keep track of who takes down more enemies? My friends are competitive and don't understand the meaning of teamwork. I'm not sure Power Rangers is the franchise for that. The deck building game is a fully competitive game that goes 2v2, which might be more their speed. I really like Heroes of the Grid as a co-op game, and I really like this idea of when you do something cool, you should be high-fiving your friends. That is kind of the feel I really want to emphasize. And so having Rangers compete against each other isn't really that much of something that I want. There will be cards like, say, Bulk and Skull that will let you troll your friends, or Squat and Babu will have a couple that will pit Rangers against each other in funny ways. But otherwise, yeah. What was the process of putting non-morphed powers as combat cards rather than character abilities, i.e. Andros and Telekinesis? With combat cards being able to be used by others in Legendary Ranger mode, would tying them to character abilities have been a bit more thematic? So making Andros' Telekinesis his character ability or his combat card was a big question. At the end of the day, there was only ever one Red Space Ranger, and it was Andros. And so putting it in his combat deck felt okay. Similarly to other civilian powers that we're going to have. We realized that if we made it so that all civilian powers were character abilities, we were really limiting the amount of personality we could give to these characters. And so, because at the end of the day, Andros is not telekinesis. That is not the most important part of who he is as a character, and it's not the most important thing that he does as a ranger. And so by putting that front and center on his character card, it just didn't feel right. And so that is an example of a civilian power we put onto his combat cards. How far ahead are we of designing versus release content? How many Rangers are on my table currently? You know what? I'm going to check, and hopefully I'm not sharing my screen right now. Let's see. Going into the playtesting thing, we've got... I think there are about a dozen Rangers still that have not been announced. Similar number of monsters. Yeah. I think, we're pretty deep in for 2021 on the development of that content. I think Scott already spoiled Dino Thunder's coming. Yeah. It's generally about 10 or so Rangers at a given time. Oftentimes, they'll come near completion, and then we'll decide on what we're going to do for the next wave. But it varies. Let's see. Scott told us everything that's coming next year in great detail. What is my favorite part of it? I disbelieve you. Love the co-op aspect of Heroes of the Grid. Let's see. Do I think civilian powers would be a good source of design space for future Rangers? Oh, heck yeah. Civilian powers are great. And I love, and the thing is, the civilian powers are often more done in the Western footage. And so we don't see the Ranger forms using their civilian powers as much. I am excited that I'm going to get to play with them, using them in their morphed forms a little more often. And I think that's going to be a nice way to unite those two elements in some form of media, which, you know, they do it in the comics too. But yeah, I think it's going to be cool. Let's see, we got like 5-10 more minutes for maybe 2 more questions, I would say. How's that sound, Desiree? Okay, let's see. Sorry for the dead time. Let's see. People hoping for RPM Gold. I'm also hoping for RPM Gold. I mean, I really liked RPM, and there's a section of the fan base that might crucify me for that, but I thought it was great. Let's see. Ooh, yeah, Dino Thunder Black losing invisibility. I was sad about that. We were gonna have invisibility be part of his kit, but it ended up just not working out. Like, you know, he has like, we didn't even get all of his elemental attacks into the game. You know, he has Fire Strike and Wave Strike, but he doesn't have like his other ones. You know, Dino Thunder Black has some of the most moves of any given Ranger, and we realized that his role as this sort of support bruiser leader type, just like the invisibility part didn't really feed into how he kind of operated in the game. So that was an example of us losing the civilian power. How do I feel about Rangers with villainous counterparts like Korag, Liambo, Merrick, and Zen Aku? I love them. Ranger Slayer already exists and will likely be the model of that, where they would have a Ranger deck and as both a hero and a villain form if we ever do them. Like, you know, Zen Aku is great. I would love to do I would love to do Korag. Man. Oh, God, there's just so many characters in the series. Are we planning on jumping between generations to try new mechanics, or just which is more fun? Yeah, we're mostly jumping through generations just to kind of get a nice spread of characters. They tend to be more series-driven than mechanics-driven. Let's see. Will Dino Thunder Black get a new deck? I will say, you know what, I'm going to spoil this. Dino Thunder Black is not getting a new deck in the Dino Thunder pack. Yeah, that's not going to be part of that. Was there any Ranger where you weren't happy with the design at all and scrapped completely? Oh yeah, plenty. Oh yeah, there's so many Rangers sitting on the cutting room floor. Many of which have not been announced or released, so we won't talk about that. But the Zeo Rangers in particular, we wanted to really flex the mechanics for them. And so there are several versions of Cat and Rocky that just ended up being completely scrapped or having their abilities used for later Rangers and completely revamped. Alien Rangers, that is a question. There are people who request the Alien Rangers a fair bit. They are not that well known broadly. I feel like there are people who would be disappointed to see more Mighty Morphin at this point. We certainly got a lot of, there's a huge franchise out there, and we have spent a long time on Mighty Morphin. Beetleborgs is a whole rights thing, so I'm not sure if we can get them properly, although, you know, I did get to slip in General Vengeance in the Machine Empire pack, so you're welcome for that. Any chance of Masked Rider ally ever? I mean, there's always a chance, and I would love it, but we'll see. I don't know. Like, that's a trickier one on the licensing front. What do you think is the smartest combo of 2 characters to play as when doing doubles? I mean, there's OP combos, certainly. I think fun-wise, I really like playing Ranger Slayer and Time Force Pink. They have just this really fun reaction chaining that you can do with them. They're super fun. What next generation are you looking to work on? No spoilers, just wait on Yeah, I too would love to see the rest of Time Force. But yeah, there's, oh man. To my knowledge, what is the most requested character by fans now? Without saying if there are plans for its release. Oh, this is gonna be fun. Yes, the most requested most requested character we have had, at least based on certain metrics, is planned for release. So good luck with that one. So good luck speculating on which one that is. And because you don't get the emails that we get, so yeah. Paired rangers similar to paired villains. That is an idea that I have been considering. I don't know whether I would put them both on the same mold, but it would allow us to get a bit more, more rangers without having to create entirely separate combat decks. Like honestly, I think Beast Morphers, the gold and silver Beast Morphers would be a great pick for something like that. Similar for RPM gold and silver. But then again, making that sculpt both gold and silver would be a real chore. Let's see. What locations would you use if Jungle Fury? I mean, that's a great question. We'll see if we get to Jungle Fury, right? Hey, Ilzap, no spoilers. Come on now. Let's see. So we got a few minutes. Let's do one more question. I can't answer anything speculating on future content. I think we spent the last 6 minutes on that. But if you have any questions about the development of the game, I'd be happy to answer that. Otherwise, we could just talk about, I don't know, Power Rangers. The Fan Appreciation Kit has tokens for Megazords that don't deploy to the board. Do you have plans for how those will be used? So those are really more for completeness. We were like, hey, we have room on the punch board for Megazord tokens for the ones that aren't token-based. Do we want to put them in? And I was like, yeah, we want to put them in. Just give them tokens. They're fun. And you can just kind of have them if they match your team, and just to show that you've unlocked the Megazord. It's fun. New AI, I can't talk about upcoming content, you guys. Like I've said that a few times now. Yeah, I suppose so. Yeah, all right. Well, it was wonderful hanging out with you guys. Hope you guys enjoyed that peek into the development. Let's see. Now we get a bunch of mechanics questions. How do you balance drawing abilities so the game is not too slow or fast? Yeah, we try and avoid things that cause players to shuffle their decks too often. The game tends to slow down the more complex strategy gets, which is just a core element of it. We try and play pretty fast and loose while playing on stream. And that tends to work out really well for us, but some people really like spending a long time strategizing. Special dice for future content, that's something, dice molds are expensive and unlikely, and if we make them for an expansion, we can only ever use them in that expansion because we can't guarantee people will have that, though we know that people will have the core box. Would I like to add new AI characters? Oh yeah, absolutely. I think they're really fun and cool design space. I'd like to explore them more. But yeah, hope you all enjoyed the stream, and I think we're getting ready to do the preview demo of the deck building game coming up next, right? That's super exciting. Can't wait to see that. Hope you guys had a good time, and I'll see you guys on the Facebook group, I suppose. You can follow me at FancyMancer, or just ping me on Facebook. I'm in the group. But yeah, have fun, and may the power protect you.